Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am here with my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. This is a theatrical mockery, man.
Okay. That was, I don't know quite how that was playing out, but all right, I'll take it.
Oh yeah, it might not be the best impression.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, you know, it's a tough one. There's not really a market for the Mark Borchardt impression, Josh.
But yet there should be.
Picture this, man.
There you go. That was a little better. That was a little stronger. So in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the films of 1999. And this episode is our Sundance Film Festival prize winner episode. And in past seasons, we've focused on the Grand Jury Prize dramatic winner. But at 1999's Sundance, the film that won both the Grand Jury Prize and the Audience Award for drama was a film called 3 Seasons that was not really accessible. So
we couldn't find it anywhere, really?
No, we really couldn't. So instead, we are talking about the Grand Jury Prize winner for documentary at 1999's Sundance, which is American Movie featuring Mark Borchardt. And I think probably a more interesting and certainly more well-known choice than that other one. So hopefully it'll be a fun one to talk about.
It's so much fun to watch. I can't see us not having fun talking about it, Josh.
It is fun to watch. I mean, we've talked about some serious, heavy documentaries, but this one is just it's almost like a comedy.
And it's nice that we're getting a second documentary in this season because the form has exploded with streaming platforms, and I think it's great to cover more than one documentary per season.
I agree, and this is very different from the film that we covered in our documentary episode, the Wim Wenders film Buena Vista Social Club.
Right.
So this film was popular. I think, I mean, as far as documentaries go, it grossed $1.2 million at the box office. I mean, I think that is pretty successful for a documentary, and certainly has become this beloved cult film over time.
Right. And Mark and Mike Shank, his cohort there, became like kind of like these fun pop cultural figures like Tommy Wiseau has, right? You know,
yes.
They pop up in things. And so I think like the success of the movie is there, but the ongoing success of these guys is just great.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly became these characters after this film was a sensation at Sundance and got all these great reviews and made money at the box office. So Chris Smith is the director here, and he was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, getting his degree in film, and that was where he met Mark Borchardt, who, as we see in this film, spends a lot of time in the editing suites there at the University of Wisconsin, working on his own movie.
You know, in a way, I give Mark Borchardt credit because he's got priorities. They're simple: drinking, movies, taking care of the kids.
Yeah. I mean, would you put drinking ahead of making movies in his priorities?
I think, though, I don't know if he could do one without the other, although he seems to try to sometimes.
Yeah. I think making movies is really the only reason that Mark Borchardt is like alive, you know, is the whole meaning to his life.
He didn't seem like a bad dad. You got to say that.
No. I'm just saying that like making movies is clearly the number one thing that keeps him going and kind of gets him up in the morning.
And that could be because it takes him 15 years to complete each movie.
It does. And he always has that. And one thing maybe we'll get into later that he talks about is the idea that like, if he finishes something, then it's no longer there, you know, is that he doesn't have the motivation to finish it because it's finished. And so he clearly has a sort of complex about not wanting to be done because then he won't be working on the movie anymore.
Right. I mean, right away, you know, people say don't make movies about movies, which is nonsense. People say, you know, when I was like when I had my hot minute in Hollywood there, Josh said, oh, don't write a Christmas movie. Don't do this. Don't write a movie about movies. It's like, it's all so dumb, right? When you have characters that are this enthralling and like the joy they have and the passion they have for making movies, I can't see how you couldn't like root for them or relate to them, whether you want to make movies or not, right? It's just so much fun. Like he says, you know, I'm going to make the great American movie, man, or something along those lines. Like They're just fun guys here.
Yeah, they are. And I think, I mean, that perspective maybe is the idea of, well, don't make a movie about Hollywood. I think that can get really tiresome. Movies that are about show business. But this is not a movie about Hollywood. This isn't a movie about showbiz. This is a movie about these small town working class guys and their dreams.
Right. In general, yes, you're right. That is the bigger theme. But we like documentaries about all the things that go wrong in making films. I think we could just both rack off a bunch of them if we were asked.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of, I mean, if you were in those meetings, you were talking about scripted fiction films, and I think that can be a tired sort of cliche, a movie about making a movie, or a movie about a filmmaker or an actor as a scripted film can be a little tiresome, but it can be great too.
Yeah. All right.
So that's really not what this is, though.
No, I just wanted to say, like,
right. No, that's fair. I mean, and I think this is a movie that even if you are not a filmmaker or an aspiring filmmaker,
that was my point. You can get behind this and root for these characters, and like you said, it's someone chasing their dream and just doing so many things wrong along the way, but always with the best intentions, it feels like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think anyone who has any kind of larger ambition in their life can relate to something about this film.
Do you have any type of larger ambition in your life?
No, I don't.
Dave?
I've got too many.
Yeah.
All right.
If Mark Borchardt was making a podcast, you know, we could identify with that. Maybe
he's got to have one, doesn't he?
He's got a radio show.
He's got a radio show, which maybe exists as a podcast. So this movie got great reviews from critics. It got 2 thumbs up from Roger Ebert and his guest critic Joyce Kulawik at the time,
and 4 stars from Ebert.
And 4 stars. Yeah, Ebert loved it, and I loved watching. So Ebert, of course, saw this film at Sundance, where, according to his review, the crowd at Sundance was so eager to see Mark Borchardt's film that he's making in this movie, Coven, that they just played it afterwards, even though it wasn't scheduled.
That's amazing. You know, for the last year or two, you might be aware there's a global pandemic. Might have heard a thing or two about it. And we often have conversations, us 3 here in this room right now, about, you know, the theatrical experience versus watching at home. And I got to say, if you had seen American Movie at Sundance, at its Sundance premiere, that has to be the ideal way to see this movie. What an amazing experience that would have been.
And then to be able to watch Coven on the big screen with Mark Borchardt there. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we talked about The Room a lot, and Dave's experience seeing that in sort of a pure form, but especially the people who saw it in the earliest premieres with Tommy Wiseau, like, that's got to be kind of what that experience was like.
And I didn't know they played Coven. Mispronounced, obviously, because Borchardt.
Well, no, you're pronouncing it correctly because that's the way it's supposed to be pronounced in the movie.
Oh, right, sure. But I didn't know it played afterwards. But that makes me happy for Mark Borchardt, which I want to be happy for him.
Yeah. And I mean, Ebert, the way he describes it, it was like wasn't supposed to, but everyone in the crowd was like, we want to see it. So my point, though, is that so he's seen both American Movie and Coven. And Joyce Kulawik, who is his guest co-host at the time, she has only seen American Movie, and they're both gushing about how great it is. And at the end of her review, she says, I can't wait to see Coven. And Ebert says, I've seen it. You can wait. And it was just this great deadpan that he gives her at the end of their review.
Well, I was that's hilarious. But the shots they showed of, I don't know the story, like how it played out in the acting. I think they were probably a little over the top. The shot design was good, and you know, from what we saw,
it was, and that's something that they mentioned too. That and that I noticed here as well is that even just in the brief glimpses that we get of Coven in American Movie, it's like, wait, maybe he kind of knows what he's doing in some fashion. Like, this looks cool.
I don't think the issue is that he didn't know what he was doing as a filmmaker, because he clearly has a depth of film knowledge and a breadth of film knowledge as well. But I think it was just like relying on just his buddies, and that they could just all do what he saw in his head. Maybe he didn't communicate well or delegate well, or just like put people in positions that they were not qualified for.
Yeah, that's certainly the case. So Ebert, in his 4-star review, said, if you've ever wanted to make a movie, see American Movie, a documentary about someone who wants to make a movie more than you do. Mark Borchardt may want to make a movie more than anyone else in the world. American Movie is a very funny, sometimes very sad documentary directed by Chris Smith and produced by Sarah Price about Mark's life, his friends, his family, his films, and his dreams. From one point of view, Mark is a loser, a man who has spent his adult life making unreleased and sometimes unfinished movies with titles such as The More the Scarier 3. And yet, Mark Borchardt is the embodiment of a lonely, rejected, dedicated artist. No poet in a Paris garret has ever been more determined to succeed.
Man, that Ebert, sometimes he gets you with the language, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, two things. The more, the scarier. I love that they've made like 6 of those, right?
Right.
How great is
Well,
it?
I think it's at one point, they have the various sequels, and a sort of a subtle thing on screen here is, Chris Smith shows a clip and it says The More the Scarier in the year, and then there's The More the Scarier 2 and 3 and the years, and then we get to, I think it's 4, or maybe it's even a later
6,
one.
I think was the last.
There you go, and it's The More the Scarier 6, and it just says unfinished, and you know exactly what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, when we were researching this, we tried to watch Coven and couldn't find it. Like, he should put Coven out with all the More the Scariers, right? And like a whole deluxe set.
Yeah, I don't know. Coven is available. You can buy it from Mark Borchardt directly
on VHS.
And I think on DVD too, but also yes, on VHS. It is like an extra feature on one of the DVD releases of American Movie, but that's not the way that we watched it. So it's out there, but it's not as accessible as it could be.
I don't think that Borchardt is the lonely artist, though, that Ebert makes him out to be. He has such a great support system. Or maybe he has trouble finding financing, but what filmmaker of that independent level doesn't? But he has a whole team who are dedicated to giving him their time and energy to help him achieve his dream.
Yeah, sometimes you wonder, like, why are they so dedicated? His friends and his girlfriend, and yeah, you're right. He doesn't have as much money as he wants, but his old Uncle Bill does give him the money. I mean, Uncle Bill may spend this entire movie complaining, but he gives Mark the money.
Man, I remember the first time I saw that at the end, that choked me up a bit.
Yes, spoiler alert there. Uncle Bill is dead.
He's been dead for a long time.
Been dead for 25 years, yeah. But he does. I mean, Uncle Bill is half dead throughout this film, I think, and that's coming.
Yeah. Well, especially at the end, he looks worse than at the beginning. But I'm glad that Uncle Bill got his due in that. His brother Mark's dad was like talked about what a great, powerful man he was, a scholar.
Yeah.
So that was nice.
Yeah.
But it is weird that he had all that money and lived in a dilapidated trailer that looked like it hadn't been cleaned.
Yeah, well, sometimes that's why you have the money, right? Because he never spent it on anything.
Josh, you said like, why do they dedicate this? I think it's kind of like that small town America. Like, they talk so much about like, yeah, when we were teenagers, all we would do is drink in the backyard. And it's like, well, now one of their friends is like, oh, I'm going to make a movie. And it's like, well, yeah, we could do that. I don't know what the Packers aren't playing today. What else are we going to do?
Right. That's true. It's something to do. So Glenn Lovell in Variety said, in his way, Mark Borchardt is as passionate about hobbling together pics as Orson Welles was. Chief difference, Welles was a genius. Borchardt is the local character who thinks he's a genius, dropping references to Bergman, Woody Allen, and the Magic Hour at production meetings. To their credit, Chris Smith and co-producer Sarah Price never imposed themselves on their subject or succumbed to the temptation to jump in and share funds and equipment. Not that the headstrong Borchardt would have accepted, even in his bleakest hours. This guy doesn't know the meaning of the word quit, which is why he's emblematic of something fundamental in the American ethos. And I mean, if there's a criticism of this film, it's the idea that it's sort of exploitative of Mark Borchardt, which, I don't really think so either, but that's the primary criticism here. But I think he gets to something important, that even if Chris Smith was like, oh, no, wait, I'm going to help you and I'm going to like take over somehow, that Mark doesn't want that. He wants to do it his way.
Right. Also, then you're almost exploiting your own project because you're not moving back, and you can have a subjective point of view, but you're changing the outcome of what you're filming at that point in time.
Right. And if you want to make a true documentary, then you have to sort of step back. And this is a common thing. I mean, I don't know if we've talked about it I think we talked about it a little in like Crumb when we talked about that film. Not that financially Robert Crumb was struggling, but just the idea of how exploitative potentially could it be of someone who maybe is mentally ill or troubled or whatever.
Right, with the brothers.
Yeah, I mean, and there's clearly maybe not Mark himself, although he's got his problems, but Mike Shank, his buddy with who's I guess he's in recovery.
He's
at
so
least.
lovable.
He
man.
is quite lovable. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted two things about this.
Yeah.
Lovell, I wrote down this quote from him. It was a madcap tribute to a beer guzzling Midwestern filmmaker. I kind of like that quote.
Yeah.
Also, the thing that I got from your kind of piece there on from him was, he thinks he's a genius. I don't know if we ever got that. I think he's very confident and like passionate about his knowledge of film, but I don't think he comes off as narcissistic or holier than thou in any way.
No, and I don't know that he thinks he's a genius per se. He is confident in his knowledge, but I think one of the things that was maybe surprising to me, or that I didn't remember, or that I was thinking of him as more of this Tommy Wiseau figure, is that he is knowledgeable.
Competent, yeah.
Yeah, when he talks about Bergman and Woody Allen in The Magic Hour, it's not because he's just dropping things that he heard. Like, he knows that stuff.
Yeah, I was on a podcast at a film festival this summer called The Martini Shot, and I think with Awesome Movie Year especially, we've gone over so many movies in these last few years. It just becomes so second nature to us that we kind of talk about it, and it might sound arrogant, but it's really just part of our life at this point in time. And this is clearly a person who loves film, who in everyday conversation is referencing films that he loves.
Right. And I mean, there's that shot of all these film books that he's acquired. And I 100% believe he read all those books and absorbed that knowledge.
I always am buying film books, and that's like one of the first sections I go to in the bookstore.
Yeah. So speaking a bit to that potential exploitation element, Lisa Schwartzbaum in Entertainment Weekly said, if Mark Borchardt weren't obsessed with filmmaking, he might have become obsessed with computer programming or ice fishing. These pastimes count as passions, but they're not groovy. Being an indie auteur is groovy, and a tacit auteur-to-auteur endorsement of the inalienable right to make movies, regardless of talent or sobriety or adult responsibilities, is what gives American movie its uneasy kick. Chris Smith and his producer, sound recordist Sarah Price will swear that their documentary is warmly admiring of their hero's struggle. And indeed, Borchardt pursues his goals with unironic dignity, most touchingly in his relationship with his uncle, whom he affectionately teases as a vital human being, not just a fragile trailer park geezer to be humored. But the two also document Borchardt's antic lifestyle with a poker-faced dispassion that doesn't protect the guy from himself. So I think what she's saying is not so much that they should have helped him with his movie, but that they should have helped him with his personal problems.
That's not the job of a documentarian. That's totally incorrect. And Lisa Schwartzbaum is a well-qualified, critic and writer, and she knows better than that what a documentarian does and what they're not supposed to do.
I mean, I agree. I think there is a point, and maybe not in this film, maybe in documentaries that are about more dire situations, dangerous situations where you have to say, like, is someone's life being threatened and do we step in?
I agree. There's none of that here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, was it uncomfortable when he's in the editing room and he has his kids like in sleeping bags there? Yeah, that's a little uncomfortable. But the kids, you could see, like, thought it was like a big adventure,
Right.
I just disagree with this whole thing that has anything to do with this film at all.
Right. And I mean, I think, like, yeah, maybe he drinks too much and maybe he's not a perfect father or whatever. But as we've seen going forward, and as she wouldn't have known at the moment, like, he's all right. He's done okay. I think if 2 years after this, Mark Borchardt had died by suicide or something, we would be looking at this movie a lot differently.
Right. And again, when there's the conversation about his ex taking away the children, he doesn't just say, oh, that's too bad, but now I'll have more time to focus on my movies. He says he loves his kids and wants his kids, right?
Right,
so, like,
sure.
It's just and he includes them in his filmmaking process,
Yeah, so, questionably, but yes.
Not really questionably. It's like one kid holds a camera, right?
I mean, yeah, not that it's irresponsible, but just I don't know. It's unclear how much they really want to be involved in
Sure,
that.
but I mean, but I, as the only one in the room who has a child, like, my daughter loves it when I bring her on, like, set or include her in a filmmaking thing.
Sure.
So maybe I'm looking at it from a different point of view, but I just don't understand this criticism of, like, Well, yeah, everyone loves this movie, but did they exploit their subject? Like their job is to film their subject, right? Not
Well,
interfere with them. And like you said, there was nothing here where it was crossing over to the red line.
right, right. I mean, I think that's a general documentary ethics thing that comes up, and like I said, we talked about in relation to Crumb a little bit, and I think a lot of it also, again, is dependent on what happened later. That we can talk about it now from the perspective of, hey, Mark Borchardt became this kind of cool pop culture figure, and he obviously appreciated everything about what was done with this film, and it worked out well for him. But they didn't know at this time how that was going to play out.
Yeah, but I mean, as you do, Josh,
Yes.
you're going to ask us the first time we saw this film.
Right.
And I saw this film, again, this was like one of those, you got to see this when it comes out.
Right.
And I'm sure I saw it very early when it was released on home video. And I never thought like, oh, they're exploiting this guy. I was like, what a joy to watch. And he's silly and wacky, but I love his passion for movies.
Right. And I think that's what most people, what their perspective was. And to that point also, I don't remember where it was, but I read another comment saying that it's not like Chris Smith was some Hollywood elite coming in. He's not
He's a grad student.
Right, exactly. He also was working with limited resources to make his scrappy little documentary and, struggling as much as Mark Borchardt was struggling.
Also, it's a bit arrogant to say like that they should have come in. Like they're not qualified professionals to deal with alcoholism or whatever mental health issues. Sure, they might have had a conversation like, how do you feel? Are you good? But like, it's not their responsibility to do that. And we've seen other documentaries where it's like, the documentarian will turn the camera on himself. I don't know if I should go on. Am I endangering? And they make the story about themselves. Like this story is all about Mark.
Right, that's true. And I don't know that whether or not Chris Smith and Sarah Price had those conversations amongst themselves, I don't know that we would have wanted to see that in this film.
I would have taken us out of the story.
Yeah, no. I agree. But I feel like this is the one common criticism here. So I wanted to kind of bring it up.
It feels like someone's overstepping their like, it's like telling someone else how to parent or something.
Right. No,
right?
it is kind of like that.
But Josh, so that's when I first saw it. When did you first see this?
Well, I did not see it at the time it came out. I did not see it until many, many years later. I don't recall if I heard about it. I'm sure I heard about it in some capacity, but it wasn't something that was a must see among people that I knew maybe. I remember when I worked on staff though at Las Vegas Weekly, so this would have been starting around 2002. So only a few years later, the art director there, Benjamin Purvis, was obsessed with this film. It was his favorite film of all time. And
I love that.
And so I think I might have seen it eventually, partially on his recommendation. So I liked it at the time, but I think by the time I saw it, Mark Borchardt was already sort of this pop culture figure.
Did you know that though?
I mean, I think I had a general sense of that. I don't know that I was super familiar with him, but I knew he hadn't like died or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't recall thinking anything negative about an exploitation aspect of this film when I saw it, and I liked it then and I liked it now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I saw it early. I don't think I saw it as late as that. But
Right.
I mean, you did say like, look, we didn't have access to this till maybe 2001 anyway.
Right, when it would have come out on home video.
Yeah.
And that's probably where it built an audience to the sort of cult level that it's become now.
Yeah. Dave?
I had never seen it until now, and I didn't really know much about it either.
All right.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I went in fresh.
And you enjoyed it?
I loved it. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
this is like made for Dave.
Yeah, totally.
That's true.
I want to make a movie like today,
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Once we finish this
I'm trying.
podcast.
That's
Yeah.
what's so funny.
So any other background on this that you want to bring up here, Jason?
Well, so we should say that Coven, the movie we keep referencing, which was kind of like the beginning piece of this, that was from 1996 through 1997. Then he's trying to make Northwestern, right?
Well, yeah, the movie starts with the idea that he's trying to make Northwestern, which is his big personal epic.
Right. And he has to go back and finish Coven. Now,
Yes.
the point is, it was filmed from 1995 through 1997 when he was doing both of these things at various points.
Right. And he finishes Coven with the idea that he's going to make some money on selling the VHS copies of Coven and use that to finance Northwestern.
Yeah.
And of course, as we talked about his penchant for unfinished projects, Northwestern still in progress.
Right. Well, the International Documentary Association ranked this as a top 20 documentary of all time, and New York Times had it in the 1,000 greatest movies ever made. Coven
Was
and
Coven on the list of the 1,000 greatest movies ever made?
we'll have to seance with Ebert and find out. But yeah, that's kind of the background. I just wanted to give us like an overall, just so we know where we're going with this thing.
Yes.
But I love the idea that he thought and it sounds so crazy now, but like, was it that crazy that you could have sold 3,000 units of a, it's almost like a TV pilot, a short film, a narrative, whatever it is.
Right. I mean, I think if it had been a feature film, like were there independent horror filmmakers making straight to VHS movies at that time that could have sold 3,000 units? Maybe so. Was like a trauma movie or something like that selling that many? I think possibly. But yeah, a 40-minute short from Mark Borchardt in Wisconsin, I think that was, I'm sure he did because of the success of American Movie. Yeah. But without American Movie, I doubt it.
Yeah. What's the path? Is it like you go to conventions, film markets? And,
it
would have taken a really long time.
You put your ads in Fangoria and that kind of stuff, or maybe you try to sell to independent video stores.
And you did have the beginning of the internet at that point in time, so maybe he could have done some stuff.
Right. But I don't know that he would have achieved his goal were it not for American Movie.
Yeah.
So we'll come back then in a moment and get more of our general thoughts on American Movie. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1999, we're talking about the Sundance-winning documentary American Movie. And we've gotten into a lot of our thoughts already on this, but I think we can say generally we both enjoyed this film.
I love it. Yeah. I'm with Dave. I loved it the first time. I love it now. You know what I love so much about it? There are movies that I feel like I could go back and watch over and over again. And maybe not every day, but like I've talked to you guys about them, Super Troopers, Slapshot.
That includes the Slapshot sequels, of course.
Yeah, all three Slapshots. Yeah. Just stuff like that, Wet Hot American Summer. And it's like, it'll just cheer you up and make you feel good and enjoy it. And I love those movies. And it's interesting because I'm literally trying to finance a movie that I think fits that model at this moment.
Coven 2.
Northwestern too.
Right.
It's gonna come out before Northwestern finally.
Nice.
But yeah, I love it. It's just it's I don't know how you can't be enthusiastic for these guys and for filmmaking if you watch this.
Yeah, I mean, and I think documentaries are rarely brought up as those kinds of comfort movies, but this is something like that because it's structured and something that I saw on Letterboxd, even from people who see it like recently within the last few years. They say like, I didn't realize that this was real. I thought it was fake, because it's almost like a Christopher Guest movie or something like that.
It is so much like a Waiting for Guffman. That's one of the movies that I really thought of when I was watching this. Mm-hmm. And, this like, hey kids, let's put on a show at all costs. And like we had said before the break, right? When we start, he's going to make Northwestern, right? But he can't get any financing together. So he's like, well, the only way I'm going to get financing, he's got like all the numbers worked out on a dry erase board.
Yeah.
And you look at the numbers and you're like, does he have any of these numbers worked out? And he's like, I got to finish Coven. And then with that, I can go and make Northwestern because I'll sell these units. And so he gets Uncle Bill to give him $3,000 to go it. And then he goes for it, like all in, man.
Right. No, he is all in. I mean, we see, I guess he has sort of odd jobs.
Yeah, he works at a cemetery and he talks, there's so many quotable moments in this. And he's like, so I go into the bathroom, man, and someone had shit all over the place, shit on the toilet and the floor. And that was a real insightful moment for me because I knew in like 10 seconds I was going to have to clean up all the shit. But it's like, is that what life is? What is life? What are the, and he's always striving for something greater. And like, for him to put a incredibly depressing situation like that into a positive spin, I thought was just lovely of this gentleman.
Yeah, and the thing about him is that we can sort of look at him as inept in some ways, but he's far more self-aware than, say, Tommy Wiseau, who we keep bringing up related to this, or other notorious, like, quote, bad filmmakers. He's confident in his abilities, but in terms of his life situation,
competent in his abilities.
Well, right. And that too, as we've said, that he's actually, maybe more talented or, technically proficient than you would guess but he's aware of his own like personal situation and the challenges that are ahead of him, and what people might think looking at him from an outside perspective.
Yeah, I think so. And it's strange to me. A lot of these guys seem to still live with their parents, right?
Yeah, well, he definitely lives with his mom, and it's unclear whether his dad and his mom live together.
They seem to live separately, but get along better. That's
right.
what
because of living separately,
right?
Perhaps.
And having parallels in my life like that. And I lived with my dad for a long time after I had graduated college because it afforded me the opportunity to pursue my art. Also, like, I just love my dad and we got along as roommates, so, but I definitely think like that afforded me more opportunities than if I had to, just get a full-time job right away.
Right. Although on the other hand, Mark clearly is paying for a lot of the bills where he lives. I mean, one of the sort of running storylines of this film is how much money he owes for various bills that have gone unpaid.
Yeah, that's so funny when he talks about how horrible things are, and then like literally the next piece of mail he opens, he gets like a MasterCard, and it's such a great moment for him.
Yes. So,
and again, I want to say like, it doesn't seem like he's a deadbeat dad at all. Like he loves his kids, he takes care of them. Doesn't seem like he's not paying for.
Well, one of the things he owes money on is child support.
Okay, well then, yeah, he should pay for that.
Yes,
so, yeah.
But true, he does care about his kids. He loves his kids. He involves them. Maybe too much. There's a great scene where they're interviewing the kids, and Chris Smith asks, what was the last movie that your dad took you to see? And the kid's like, Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, it's funny. I always talk to her name's Stephanie. That's my daughter's mom. And I was like, on Scarlett's second birthday, I want to show her The Godfather because I want her to be engulfed in this culture. But hey, man, I have not shown her Apocalypse Now.
Did you show her The Godfather?
No, but she's seen some Chaplin shorts, which are more age appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah. Well, we talk about Dave's parents showing him inappropriate things at a young age.
Yeah, worse than Apocalypse Now.
Oh yeah.
But you're right. He definitely cares about his kids, and I would love to know. I mean, we know what Mark Borchardt is up to now, but what happened to Mark Borchardt's kids?
Yes, that would be great. And also, did he and Joan stick it out?
Right. The other hilarious, I mean, I don't know if hilarious is the right word, but fascinating thing to me is that this dude has two women who are like fighting over him.
Small town Wisconsin, buddy. That's all I can think. So
it's kind of amazing.
And we got to talk about Michael Shank, his best friend, who's always there, who has definitely been affected by his drug use over the years.
Yeah, that's to put it mildly.
And one of the funniest scenes is when he tells Mark this story of how he took a bad acid trip and he, because it was laced with like PCP or something. And at the hospital, they thought he was going to die. And he got revived. And the first thing he did was check his pockets so he could take the other 3 tabs of acid, and they were gone. But again, he's talented. His music's really good. I love that Metallica cover he does in there.
Yeah, he does a bunch of different covers, and he's put out some albums.
Right.
Although I feel like in the context of this movie, it's entertaining to see him play music. I don't know that I would want to listen to an album of his music.
Songs I know, Dreams I Know, Yesternight, and classical songs I know. So, he's putting out a classical album. Sure. What's the Metallica song he does?
It's called Fight Fire with Fire.
Yeah, I kind of like it better than the Metallica version.
All right. Well, we talked about, the big deal of Metallica allowing their music to be used in Paradise Lost, and so this was also, it's not their recording of it, but they still had to give permission.
So they're surrounded by all these characters, the mom who's always like worrying about him and, begrudgingly participates in everything. Uncle Bill, we mentioned. Their friend Ken, who's always like there, but except when he's in jail for
reasons that we never really learned.
I really wanted to know that. And then some of the actors, like that dude Robert Richard Jorge, who's like right out of a Christopher Guest movie,
Yes,
and
he's a very quirky St. Clair character.
It's pronounced Coven, right, Mark? Like that type of thing. And he's foppish with his wardrobe. And,
yes.
You see them putting on these Halloween radio plays and just his screams. He's so dedicated. Like, how can you not like these guys?
No, they're all likable. Everyone that we see, there's no sort of villain character. There's no one who's opposed to Mark who we want to root against or anything like that.
The villain is the cost of art.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's the villain for anything, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I mean, I did want to say again, one of the things that we see a lot throughout this movie is the sort of ridiculous makeshift way that Mark is setting up a shot, whether it's trying to bash that guy's head into a cupboard that won't come
That's
apart.
so crazy. It was at Tom Schimmel's.
Yeah.
And he just like, they like Ken's like, well, I scored it, so it should be easier.
Right.
And it's totally not. They like hit this dude's, he must have like, it looks like a concussion.
Yeah. And so we see that and we laugh at how ridiculous that is. Or the one scene where he's on the floor and he's got his mom working the camera and she doesn't understand how to frame a shot and all this stuff. And we think, oh God, this is disastrous. And then at the end, when we finally get the premiere of Coven, the big theatrical premiere that everyone in this town comes out for, and you see those shots in context and how they've been edited together. And at least I was like, oh, wow. He knew exactly why he needed those shots and how they would work together. And it makes total sense.
Well, the shot design, like we said, looks good. And yeah, it looks professional. So, but I don't know about the story or anything.
Right. I'm not saying
that's another thing is like, we always see him like rewriting.
Yes, we do. And changing the dialogue. And I'm not saying that Coven is a brilliant movie. I mean, obviously Ebert didn't think it was, but just that he does have this kind of visual sense and working with
he
these
definitely does. So.
Extremely limited resources, he's able to do something. I mean, if he had gone on to greater success, if he had been Kevin Smith, again, I think someone on Letterboxd talked about like, I wish I lived in a world where Mark Borchardt achieved this success instead of Kevin Smith.
I literally talk about an acid flashback. I had this conversation the other day and I don't think it was with either of you.
No.
But I was talking about this movie and I literally said like, what's the difference between what Mark Borchardt did and what Kevin Smith did? Right. And one is that Kevin Smith finished his movie.
Yes.
And two is that he has such a knack for dialogue. Right. But there is a lot of filmmakers that, and I try to watch as many of these low budget indie things as possible because like rah, right, man?
Sure.
So yeah, it's so close. What separates one from the other? It's it's a whole run Lola run situation here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that also, we have that scene that you mentioned where Mark is like in all this debt and then he gets the credit card and is excited. And we as viewers are like, oh, Mark, what are you doing? But, Kevin Smith famously financed all of Clerks on credit cards. And if that hadn't worked out, Kevin Smith would have been in exactly the same position as Mark Borchardt, but we celebrate him.
Ed Burns is the same thing. Like if you read his book, I'm serious. Like he's like, hey, I can make this movie, Brothers McMullen, and if it doesn't work out, I'll pay it off and then I'll get another 25,000 and then I'll make another movie. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Like I used to work at Apple. I haven't touched my Apple stock. Last year, I really considered like, maybe I'll cash it all in and use that to finance a movie. And I was like, wait, I have a kid. I shouldn't do that. And like, even when I'm talking to my brother, he's like, yeah, if you were a single guy, I'd say go for it. And I'm like, the reason I'm not is because I, want to be a responsible dad. And that's a good thing.
No, that is good. And Mark Borchardt would not do that.
No, but I can relate to this movie on a lot of levels, I'd say.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to also, it's amazing to me because you watch this movie and, or at least for me, one of the things I thought is like, how did they even think to make a documentary about this guy? Because the point of this movie at the time that it's being made is that he's a nobody. Nobody knows who he is except maybe his friends and family. He's toiling in obscurity. And, so without knowing the background, I thought, how do you even make a movie about this guy? And then you realize, okay, they met because it was, on this college campus. But I'm just imagining Chris Smith sitting in this editing suite, editing his graduate thesis, and Mark Borchardt walks in. Like, what kind of experience was that?
Right. Well, he's very charismatic. So you're taking it from that and like, oh, this would be an interesting guy to cover. And I think that's, and then it just, the comedy of errors that comes along with it. There's a lot of fun things to cover here.
Right. I'm just saying that like, the experience of encountering Mark Borchardt for the first time must be kind of amazing.
Right. Yeah. That's why you do it. So,
right.
Are you surprised that no one after this movie was like, hey man, come direct, like Trauma, for instance, was like, we'll give you $200,000, go direct a movie for us.
Right. I wonder about that because I mean, I think it in part may be that there's enough in this movie that makes you think that maybe he can't handle it. Like you say, the sort of working with collaborators and that kind of stuff that someone like Troma, who is like, sure, here's $200,000, but you need to make this movie in 6 days or whatever is concerned.
But if you're a film, and I want you to get back to your point, but if you're a film company, you throw out like a very experienced line producer with them who keeps them on schedule. and you make the movie.
Right. And maybe so. The other thing I think is, and it speaks to what was in that review about what would have happened if Chris Smith tried to help him, is the idea that he probably doesn't want, he wants to make Northwestern. He doesn't want to make Toxic Avenger 5. You know, he's going to make his own vision and stick with it.
But wouldn't that, I wonder if he, you know, he seems aware enough to know that, like, well, if I made this, then that could help me make the next thing. Literally, that's the point of this movie, right?
Right.
So if he had that opportunity, I think that only would have helped him get along.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, we can talk about this in the next section, but I mean, he has worked as an actor a lot more than as a director. Yeah. And so maybe that's what he decided. Hey, I'll go hang out on this indie film set for 3 days and do a part, and they'll pay me some money, and I can pour that money back into Northwestern. Or I think there's another film that he's been making for the last 15 years or something that he hasn't finished. You know, I don't know. But I mean, that certainly is a thing that you wonder about. And I think other filmmakers that are these kind of outsider artist filmmakers that become famous either through documentaries or through cult films like The Room, they do end up in that position where someone offers them some more money, and some of them go on to be legit successes. Right. So I don't know.
Yeah, The Room, I definitely think the Shank and Borchardt relationship versus Tommy and Greg Sestero, right?
Right. Well, Dave, as a Room super fan, did you see a lot of that in this?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. But, you know, actually, one thing that I wanted to bring up that kind of plays into that a little bit, you were talking about how, you know, competent he is as a filmmaker and how he probably obviously read those books that he has and stuff like that. As the host of Piecing It Together, I really liked when he was listing off his influences. And he didn't just list them, but he actually talked about why they were his influences. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Night of the Living Dead, and Dawn of the Dead. And I just thought, you know, that just further goes to show how much he actually cares about movies.
Yeah.
And that, I think the movie you're talking about is Scare Me, the one that he's been working on for.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
And supposedly there's a Coven 2 coming out as well.
Yeah, we'll see.
What about I want to get back to Mike Shank for a second, because I love, like, you know, when we covered Herzog and like his version of America and Strozek. This is what it really should have been right here, right?
I would imagine. I don't know if Herzog's ever commented, but he must love this movie.
I would imagine, yeah.
But like, you know, there's and I think they do a good job of the passage of time with like using holidays, which is always a great way to do it.
Yeah.
And you're interviewing Mike Shank after Halloween, and he's telling you what he's thankful for, and it's like, I'm thankful for all this food that I had, and I had a scratch off lottery ticket, and I won $600, and it's like the simple joys of life this man is getting.
Well, he's also a gambling addict, so I don't know if we're supposed to feel happy about his scratch.
Well, I'm happy he won.
Yeah, it's better.
But he mentioned that he was just happy to have those, or like when they what was I think they were going to get sound or something, and like or they were going to film that the narration with Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
And Shank gets in the car and he's like, my mom packed us a lunch and sandwiches, and he's like, oh, that's so clutch, man, or whatever. Like, just those things are just so joyous to me.
Right. And they do the language is great too. You know, I love how Mark Borchardt calls his kids man. Like,
he does say man 151 times in this film.
I believe it. Yeah. And I just love that he's talking to his daughter. He's like, did you swear, man?
Yeah. That's, you know, and I don't do it like that, but I definitely call my daughter bro or dude sometimes for fun.
All right. So do we want to give this one a rating? Or you have any other thoughts you want to share here?
Well, no, just the ending where he does premiere Coven.
And, come on, man.
It's a big joy. What we see anyway is a joyous experience. And you see those kids on the street, like coming up to him, like, what are you going to do next? Like, you know, this was a big deal in this town.
It was. And I saw again on Letterboxd someone mentioning that, you know, to this day, Mark Borchardt is a big celebrity in Milwaukee.
That's amazing.
In this area.
I love that.
It is nice. Yeah.
Should I rate it, Dave, or did you want to say it?
No, let's get to the
What are we rating it out of? Five unfinished
films.
Nice.
I'm sure he's got that many.
Yeah, it has 4 for me. I love it. It's a great movie, and I will definitely watch it again, I hope, sometime.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I highly recommend if people haven't seen it. So, Dave?
4 from me too.
All right, good stuff. Well, we'll come back then in a moment and talk about the legacy of American Movie. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1999, we've been talking about Sundance winner American Movie. And we've talked a little bit about the legacy of this movie for Mark Borchardt himself. and the way it kind of turned him into this big pop culture figure. He has acted in a lot of small scale indie type films, and I think he's one of these personalities that, if you're making your low budget horror film or whatever, and you can get Mark Borchardt to make a cameo, that the potential audience is going to be into that.
Well, yeah, and their friendship, I mean, Family Guy, I think he was on, right?
Yeah.
And they've had specials that I could not find. Mark and Mike on Zero TV. I don't even know what Zero TV is.
I don't know, but Mark himself after this was a guest on David Letterman a bunch of times.
And he was his election correspondent for the 2000 election, which is great.
Yeah. And that made me think of one person to compare him to that we've talked about is like Harvey Picar, another sort of outsider working class guy who made this weird art, on his own and became this pop culture figure briefly.
Right. I think you're right. I think that's right. And they did host a TV special, the two of them, Night of the Living Dead, live from Wisconsin. So kind of goes back to the influences and everything.
Yeah. And I think they do still have, or Mark still has his radio show in Wisconsin.
My Dinner with Gabe Van Handel.
What is that?
No, it's called Cinema Fireside, and it's the
radio show. Yeah.
Or My Dinner with Gabe, and whose last name is Van Handel.
Okay, sure, yeah. I mean, and he's someone also who's always at like horror conventions. And
he's made a living in the field that he loves, even if it's not in the way he expected.
Right. I mean, he basically is making a living out of being Mark Borchardt.
That's the best way to do it, baby. You can't make a living with being Mark Borchardt.
No, I can't even make a living being Josh Bell. It's really a struggle.
Maybe you should try doing it being Mark Borchardt.
Yeah, well, he's got that market cornered, I think. And Chris Smith has become a very successful documentary filmmaker. Nothing quite as quirky as this film. The only one of his movies that I've seen was his documentary about the Yes Men, which is this weird performance art troupe that does kind of political pranks, and it was fine. Jason, I think you saw his Fire Festival movie, right?
I did, and it was kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Because I think he's so talented. And this one was not as good as the one that was on Hulu, where they had access to, was it Billy Smith or whatever? The guy.
Yeah. That was kind of controversial because they paid him to be in the movie.
It made the movie so much better. I don't care. But Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, which is all about Jim Carrey's performance in Man on the Moon, the Milos Forman documentary about Andy Kaufman and how he stayed in character the whole time. I thought that was a pretty good piece.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but in a weird way, Jim Carrey is a sort of Mark Borchardt-esque figure.
Yeah. Well, so with Chris Smith, I mean, he's having a big year right now. 100-Foot Wave it's on my to watch list. It's about, surfers who go after the biggest waves in the world. And I couldn't understand why he seemed to have moved into like these limited, 6-hour miniseries, which of course that's where the money is right now.
I think that's the reason is that's what they want.
I mean, I couldn't understand why that piece needed that, but it seems to be getting a lot of acclaim.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen that. And my general feeling is that those miniseries, with few exceptions, would be better off as feature films. But you're right that that's kind of where the money is. He did
I agree with you.
But apparently, the streaming services don't. He did an 8-episode Netflix, one of these true crime series that I haven't seen.
Yeah, The Disappearance of Madeleine McCann. If I'm not mistaken, she was like a 3-year-old girl in Britain on a holiday with her family, and it was a huge story. And her parents were suspects, and I'll probably watch that too. Obviously, the biggest hit he has is as a producer of Tiger King.
Oh, was he a producer on that?
Yeah, one of the execs. I mean, the American movie is probably the biggest.
Right. I mean, as a director, yeah. But I think that is the thing, is that this is such a unique film, and that it seems like his career subsequent to this has been doing a lot of these more straightforward documentaries.
I mean, I don't know how you always find a character like Mark Borchardt, but I did see he is producing. He's not directing another one where it seems like he might have found another character, or the filmmaker did, called The Fight Before Christmas. It's about a man who loves Christmas and goes all out with the decorations, documentary, and the HOA of the neighborhood he lives in hates what he does, so he's fighting with them. And that seems like totally up the Chris Smith alley.
Could be some fun characters in that.
Josh, what about The Pool, his narrative film?
I have not seen that. And his first film, the one he was working on when he met Mark Borchardt, called American Job, is also a narrative film. And those two, I think, are his least known. So he's definitely more known for documentaries.
Yeah, I'd like to see the narratives, but he's, I mean, man, made a career as a documentarian.
Absolutely. We mentioned a bit the idea of these films about outsider artist filmmakers that I feel like have become,
Love them.
more and more popular, as we talked about when we talked about The Room. People like Tommy Wiseau, or the filmmaker behind Birdemic, or these sort of bad movie filmmakers are pop culture personalities far more now than they ever used to be. I also thought, documentary wise, of a film called Zombie Girl, which is about Emily Higgins. And that film is about her making her independent zombie feature film when she was 12. And it's similar to this in a way that, is a person who is very confident at a very young age.
That sounds great. I want to see that.
It's a fun movie. And the difference about Emily Higgins is she's had a career more like what you mentioned, what would have happened to Mark Borchardt. She was in this documentary. It was acclaimed. It played festivals. It got her a lot of attention. And she's kind of moved up. She's made movies for Netflix and other independent films and has had a career based on that. So,
there's the one about Troll 2. The making of Troll 2.
Yes, best worst movie.
There's the one about the kids who did the shot-for-shot remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is amazing that they were able to do anything like that. Right. And those guys are working, and or at least one of the guys has had a pretty good run now. And then, if there are all the other side of that is successful filmmakers who have trouble making a movie. Lost in La Mancha, Terry Gilliam. Hearts of Darkness, which is about the Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, exactly. Werner Herzog and the Burden of Dreams, Fitzcarraldo.
Right.
And one that we will be talking about later this season.
What?
Yeah, because we're going to be talking, I guess we'll just say it, in our cult classic. We'll be talking, which this could have been also.
Oh, this is absolutely a cult classic.
We'll be talking about Boondock Saints and the documentary where they just trash Troy Duffy overnight, which is a interesting film also, and Troy Duffy's come to terms with it, I think. So.
Right. Yeah, those are all, I've seen most of those, and they're all entertaining films to watch.
I think it's a great genre to, a subgenre to look into.
Right. And this is a great example of it. So
I wanted to mention a movie that was at this festival, Cordillera, where I was at, called Small Town, Wisconsin. I think it won Best Comedy up there, and he's in this. Mark
Borchardt, is it? How does he do in that film?
I didn't get to see it, sadly, but I've been looking forward to it. And Mike Shank was in Storytelling, the Todd Solondz film.
Todd Solondz, I can see him being really into these people.
Yeah. So the only other thing I wanted to mention is, like, Sarah Price, give her some love, produced this thing.
Yes.
Directed the L7 documentary, Pretend We're Dead. She's done some episodes of the Carrie Diaries, and yeah, so she's doing good stuff too.
Right, and clearly a very close collaborator with Chris Smith on a project like this that has a very, very small crew.
I don't have any update on Robert Richard Jorge for you.
And we all know what happened to Uncle Bill.
Yes. Oh, hey, the ending, like we said, he leaves him $50,000 to complete Northwestern, which
did not happen.
He didn't.
Someday in awesome movie year 2025 or something, we'll be able to talk about Northwestern.
All right,
or scare me.
I'm in for that.
Me too. So that is American Movie, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Check us out on the social media.
Yes, please do. Jason Harris Comedy / J Harris Comedy on Facebook, J Harris Comedy on Twitter, Jason Harris Comedy on Instagram. Go for jason.com, a website made by Mark Borchardt. AwesomeMovieYear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter.
I am at JoshBellHatesEverything.com, at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'm also going to do a quick plug for my music website, bydavidrosen.com, where at the time this goes up, I'll have just put out a new album, The Dissection Table, which is a soundtrack to this lost film that I scored, which, speaking of things like American Movie, fits right in there. It's this movie that just never came out, but I really love the score, and I've finally been given the go-ahead to release it.
And
so
I would love it if you would get a Michael Shank album and do some covers of Michael Shank
collaboration
music.
of some kind.
I am down for that.
All right. So, Jason, what do we have in our next episode?
It's our Best Picture winner, Josh, American Beauty.
So tune in next time for American Beauty.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.